So I guess I'm live right now. I know it's really late and I thought I would go live because a lot is going on. You might hear a fan in the background. It's been really hot in California, LA County. Um, we've been experiencing a lot of heat lately, and all you can do is think of like being in a shaded place and having a lot of cool water and trying to relax. But the reason why I really wanted to go live and go off of from, you know, getting away from the articles is I'm just going to be honest here and say that I really believe that we are all in a situation and it isn't good right now, and it has to do with money. And it's been like that for a time. And so I haven't been on here for a while because I've been really studying what has been going on in the world and just all over. I feel like it's not even just here in LA County. I feel like pretty soon we're going to be looking at the wealthy versus the poor, and we already are seeing a lot of that, but I don't think we're paying attention. Not everyone. Some are seeing it and some are living it, and some are not really paying attention. We're trying to go on with life as if nothing is happening. We're trying to act like everything is normal, and it isn't. I feel like things are not normal because we have more poverty. And I'm going to say this here that in LA County, a lot of these schools, the fundings are getting very scarce. And what I've realized is when people who are greedy or either they're self-centered and they're only about the wealthy and the ultra rich, they are far removed from localized communities, and especially communities of color tend to get hit the hardest when it comes to money. So if you drive in the city of LA, you'll see some businesses trying to hang on in there, some people doing food trucks, some people doing still mom and pop businesses, but they're really hanging on by a thread. They're doing their best to stay open and keep their doors open, but it is no guarantee that the doors that they have open are going to stay open. I believe that is why there's such a push when you go on TikTok and some various platforms, when you go on various apps that are successful to some degree or popularized, you'll see people promoting their businesses because it's hard to get people to come out to support businesses when your jobs don't pay well and you're living paycheck to paycheck and you can just barely afford a little bit of food and groceries. You just can barely afford to pay a bill or two, and you're still always behind, or your check is already spent before you even cash it. And so that's what we're looking at here for many Angelinos, many people who are here in California. And what I've realized is a lot of people are trying to make other efforts to find housing that they are not having to worry about being heavily taxed. They're not having to worry about evictions. And I feel like that is what has caused homelessness to grow exponentially. They would have you to believe when you watch these news programs that homelessness is solely caused by other people's actions or not being careful about how they budget their money or maybe having issues with substance abuse. I think those are the symptoms when you get into substance abuse is that is how people medicate themselves maybe to escape the reality that things aren't going well in their lives. And people have to understand that they might have not have always been the way they are or what we see them as when you see people who are intense or who are visibly homeless. If they're living in and out of hotels, sometimes there's functional homeless people who they may not be living out of a tent, but they're couch surfing, or they're living out of hotels, living out of a storage shelter, or they're living with friends, or they're living with different people in between. They're, bouncing from room to room, and those numbers are not counted. But homelessness is growing, and also people living in RVs and in vans and in cars is also growing, and the news is not sharing those things. They want to turn a blind eye to what is really going on. It's not just having a place to stay, but affordability is the issue here. And so you can have a place to stay and not be able to afford it and just be really next to poverty as close as possible to the point to where you're only paying rent for a place to live because you don't want to be on the street and you don't want to be in a situation where you feel vulnerable. However, you're still vulnerable because you can't afford groceries, you can't afford lights, you can't afford TV, you can't afford much food. You have to ration your food. And there are people living like that, especially when they're retired or they're on a fixed income and they don't make very much money. And now that we have all of the political issues and the fallout with ICE and with some of the other issues that we're dealing with, it makes it a far worse situation. And I know I've heard some people say that they voted for Trump and they're allies of Trump, or however they would want to put it. But I'm going to tell you this: I didn't vote for him the first term. I didn't vote for him on the second term. And I don't agree with his policies. And I know some people are going to say, well, I've seen some videos where they say Black Americans, they're foundational Americans, and they're looking at the 14th Amendment and they're trying to make sure that Black people get all the benefits that they need to get, and this, that, and the other. But I would say to you, be careful about that, because for a long time, Trump has not really been an ally with all Black people as you think. Um, he has a history and a backstory, and a lot of that is checkered and is not very positive when it comes to the Black community. Some rappers used to lift him up back in the 80s. Some still do. Some people that are of color support him, and some have regretted reporting on videos that they regretted voting for him now that they know what he's really about. I really feel like he's an opportunist, and he's not the sole fault of what's going on in the world, but he's the face. And I feel like our problems are a lot even bigger than just Trump. And I know people will put the focus on solely the president, but I think something nefarious and something a lot bigger is going on here. And the more we ignore it, the worse it's going to get. And it has become a slow burn. It's almost like people haven't caught up to what is going on, and some have. Some are doing things now to prepare. But I'm thinking that in the near future, we're going to see a lot of more businesses that right now they're struggling to keep their doors open. A lot of more businesses and places that you would send your kids, or that places that you thought were safe, and that they were untouched are going to be places that you're no longer going to be able to access because they are on a very scarce budget and they may end up closing their doors altogether. And I feel like neighborhoods that have a larger population of people of color are the hardest hit. People that are in poverty, um, they're the hardest hit communities because those communities aren't particularly favored. And so that is what I believe. I believe things are going to get worse, and we just really haven't seen the worst of it yet because the news always shows fluff pieces and they always have people smiling and wearing nice clothes and telling you about all the great things in the city and the weather and all these things that will make you feel like there's some more normalcy still in the US. But the big picture that they're not talking about is the poverty that is growing in the US because of the high cost of living in some states. Some states are going to be so expensive that only the wealthiest of the wealthy are going to be there, but that may not even work out as well because you're going to have people who are the locals that are the poorer or are maybe not making as much money or doesn't possess as much will no longer be able to work these jobs because they can't afford to live where they work. And that's where we're headed in that direction. And that's an unfortunate situation. And I believe that's where we're headed to where people are going to be so under the gun in terms of being burdened with rent and mortgage that you're going to see foreclosures skyrocket. More evictions might happen because these landlords are going to expect them to give them money and they're not going to be able to give them the money. And so that's where we're headed. And it's not in a good place. And I remember being in General Discount. It was a little store that's on Imperial and Century is where it's located. Or Imperial, not Imperial and Century, but I would correction, Imperial and Crenshaw, right in the area of Inglewood, California, to be exact. uh, Man, he tells me, he says he remembers when Inglewood was a place or a city where you couldn't have black people live there because of the racism. And then he said that was some years, many, I guess, decades or so ago. And he said that it got to the point where when they did open things up for people of color to live, what he was able to do was put um, money together and he bought a house for $30,000. And that was with his wife. Um, but he says now you can't even really afford to do home buying because homes are so expensive now. If you had $30,000, you wouldn't find a home for $30,000. And for $30,000, what you'd be doing essentially is using that money to put it down on hopefully a, a purchase of a home. And you might not get a house, you might get a condo, maybe if that, or bungalow. And so that's what we're looking at here. And it looks like a lot of what is going on is a lot of people don't realize, but poverty is growing and the wealth gap is growing and more people are not able to afford just even going out and having a good time. You know, people are able to, at one time, go out to dinner with their family, go see movies and do things. Now you got to plan in advance to do just fun things with your kids or with your family members because you got to really make all of your money count. And so I've noticed people are working instead of one job where you used to could work one job and live comfortably. Now you have to work a job or side hustles. Maybe you got to work 2 and 3 jobs or work one job for a while to cover another situation. And then you got to find side hustles and different things to try to accommodate your lifestyle just to live to somewhat decency so that you can at least keep a roof over your head if that's how you're trying to do to manage, living here in the cities. And it's becoming a full-time job in it of itself, just trying to stay housed. So I noticed too, I had paid close attention to some of the videos that I had been watching about how extended stay businesses are making money off the unhoused. That's becoming a booming business for people who are in, I guess, long-term uh, hostels or hotels or motel living. And what I was discovering is that living in a extended stay can cost more money than living in an apartment, which is really crazy because these people are already evicted and they know that these people can't move back into their place they've been evicted from. And then it makes it harder for you to find shelter when you've been evicted. So, what they've done is made it essentially a business to make money off the people who are unhoused. And that is the sad reality. And they don't speak enough about it. You don't hear these things in the news because they don't want you to really look at what is really going on in the world, that all of us are really suffering, all of us that are in these situations that I'm referring to. Now, maybe some of the people who are more on the higher in wealth, income, higher income earners, maybe they don't feel as threatened by the political climate and the things that are going on economically that are hurting a lot of folks because maybe they have somehow been fortunate enough to acquire more income or money. Um, if they have money that was inherited from settlement or of some sort, or persons that were here before them, maybe family members. Not everybody's that fortunate to be able to have a large amounts of money to put themselves up for maybe many years to come. And so I feel like crime is going to go up if poverty goes up. That is the ultimate, thing that happens. It's a given. Um, that's the unfortunate part. But I believe the real rich will, they may start to build like more gated communities and walled off areas to keep the poor out. And there are already places that are just like that I'm referring to. But I feel like things are going to get worse as time goes on, and the more it gets worse, the more evident people are going to see that there's a real dividing line based on the poor versus the wealth that the ultra rich that is going on in the US of A and in many other places. We've seen some similar dynamics like that. And I was looking at a video of the Philippines where they were showing you have these really wealthy people and these beautiful buildings, but then as you look over amongst that, you'll see the very poor shanty shacks, people eating garbage and living on almost nothing, and living under sewers and in tunnels and things like that, where they're like extremely poor. and they don't have a lot of resources. And I feel like that's the direction, unfortunately, that we end up heading in when people are basically forced to work until they drop. And like I was telling you, this man that said that he at one time could buy a house for $30,000. He said now, he said, I know what's going on, and he says it looks like it's not headed in a good place. The way things are headed, they want you to work until you drop. And he's absolutely correct. And I feel like we're working these jobs that are not paying us money to be able to save, to get into a home. And the way homes are so expensive now, most homes are over $1 million. And not very many people have $1 million saved up or laying around. Some people might have access to money, as to others don't. And it's going to be very evident that there is a dividing line between the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor. That's what I'm saying. And I don't really feel like the news really covers everything. They might mention a few things and then they kind of gloss over it, but it's a subject that people don't want to talk about because they know it exists and they know it's bad. And some people know that they played into this American dream, and some people are fortunate enough to get, you know, talents recognized, and others aren't. Others might have worked regular jobs, saved up a little bit of money, but their money is being stretched now to the extremes because of the high gas, the high food prices, and now you gotta worry about what foods you eat because you don't know if the foods are contaminated with something that'll make you deathly ill. So we're moving in a direction that isn't good, guys. That's what I'm saying. And now we're also going backwards in time. A lot of the efforts that people made here before we were born, all the marches and all the fighting for civil rights, a lot of that is trying to they're trying to erase. And so that's why I'm saying that, you still got these people running around here wanting to pledge alliances to people they don't even really know have their best interest and has a checkered past. However, they want to also now push us against each other to fight over citizenship because some of us are legally and binding through the 14th Amendment natives to this land, but then others have come here as travelers and they've overstayed their visa or they've gotten in trouble with their citizenship being into question. And so this is another buffer that this group is using. And I don't know who all's involved, but I know there's somebody behind the president that wants things to go like this. We got this war, the high food prices, the high gas, the high cost of living, and now you got people fighting over who's legal and who's not legal. And so when you're busy fighting over who you are and where you were born and what language you speak, what culture you're from, your eye is not on. They're trying to hurt all of us. They're trying to make it so that you're busy fighting over these things at the bottom. It doesn't pay you your bills. It doesn't solidify that you're going to have longevity in the place that you're staying. You're going to probably have to move. And if you have to move, you may have to move further out just to be able to afford where you move. Or you may have to entirely move out of paying rent to these companies and move into a mobile home on wheels and spread your horizons out. And who knows, some people are going in those directions because, not because they want a vacation, because they are forced to, because their money is not being able to ground them into a comfortable living, situation because things are so expensive right now and they just don't seem to have any end in sight of when things are going to be lowered, if it's going to be lower rent. And so I'm seeing for rent signs all over in LA County where there's places being built, but affordability is the thing that is the question. Is it affordable? They've built a lot of stadiums in these cities, and a lot of the landlords use that to their advantage to upcharge the rent. And that is where the problem comes in at. Um, then these programs like Section 8, they get a lot of money for, these programs, and then the person pays a little fraction of rent, and then that rent, might carry them for a while, but the rents in general, if they don't have that program, and for anybody that wanted to move in just on meager income, cannot afford to live there. It becomes a battle of who's going to live in what type of housing and where. And so also you have heavily policed areas, because if it's areas of people of color, those places are heavily policed. You're racially profiled, and automatically you might be living amongst people who are predators, because that's the cheaper places to live, and that's where most of the people who are people you should be worried about in some sense are on guard for. They tend to merge into those areas, and that's what causes the place to become just an urban ghetto. And so it's sad, but it's the reality. And people like to turn their head to it because they don't know how to fix this issue, or they don't want to fix the issue. It's easier to blame the people that are dealing with it or living it every day. And so that is wrong. I feel that is wrong. It's morally wrong. And it's watching people die in real time because they can't afford health care, they can't afford housing, they can't afford food. It's high extreme poverty is what it is. And there are people that I literally, if they have something and the other person doesn't, they're able to just turn their head to it because it's easier to blame the people that are dealing with it rather than to take accountability that something is grossly wrong here, that people who just want to live, even on just the meagerest amount of money, just to be able to eat, just to be able to sleep, just to be able to have the basics, that should not have a label of luxury. It is a necessity. People are marketing off you being able to just live. And then I don't even want to get started on when you die, how expensive funeral costs are, and how expensive it is to bury someone or even put them in a crypt. Everything is about money. That's what I'm saying. And they are really screwing everybody over. A lot of people who are in this predicament who know what I'm talking about. If you are not in a situation where you know that someone is helping you, where you've gotten a whole lot of money, where you can just be able to utilize that for many years. If you're not the ultra rich, if you're not in a secure situation, you are just really one or two paychecks away from being in the situations that I'm referring to. And you are hanging on by a thread. It could be one health scare that could change the trajectory of your life forever. And a lot of people do not take it. And it can happen to not only people that are older, it can also happen to people that are younger. And a lot of people don't look at those things because they don't see it happening. They don't feel it happening. So they don't worry about it happening because they don't think it's going to happen to them. They don't prepare for it until it's too late. But the way I see things going, I feel like a lot of this is not even people's fault. This is more political fallout that is also happening in real time, and it's going to hurt millions of people. They have been making cuts to the schools, they've been making cuts to the health care, and they, as in the people that are on those seats that are in the White House right now, the Trump administration has been cutting a lot of programs. And it's to the extreme, and it's going to hurt millions of people. I don't care what black people on here want to run around talking about they are in agreement with Trump. You are under an illusion. You're under a fog. You are doing just what he wants you to do to play into that idea of the American dream that, oh, we're going to somehow be on top of others because we're foundational. But you can be foundational and be foundationally homeless. Yeah, you might not get deported, but you might not have that Elon money. You might not be able to have a place to live, food to eat. You could be foundationally a slave. Now we're seeing more and more young black people, black bodies being hung, and they want to write it off as it's some kind of accident or there was no foul play. Wake up, people. Something really horrible is going on. And if you don't see it now, you are going to see it. And unfortunately, it's going to be at a time that it's going to be way too far too late. And you're going to see that a lot of people are affected by it. And it's coming. It's coming whether you like it or not. And this thing they call American Dream, it was all hype. This is a project, and this project isn't a good one. It doesn't work for everyone. It only works for a select group. And if you ain't in the club, then you ain't in that club. But this is not good. None of it, from where I'm sitting, from what I see, none of this is going in a good place. And a lot of people are going to feel the pain if they haven't even felt it yet or they're under a fog. You're going to feel it. This thing with all of the foods being something wrong with it, having to be recalled. The eggs are now having to be recalled. The problems with the lettuce. These are certain signs that are telling us, people, something isn't going right. And it's going to get worse. It is. And I hate to be the one to say this, and I'm not wishing doom and gloom. It's the trajectory we're on. What is going on in the world, the reality that's right before us that people are ignoring. And it's dangerous. This is a dangerous situation to put people in.